Hey everybody, this is Brett Ingram, and this is the optYOUmize podcast, the show that helps entrepreneurs build their dream business and dream life. Today, we're talking with Dr. Kevin Gazzara, CEO of Magna Leadership Solutions, management and leadership expert, executive positive intelligence coach, professor at 5 universities, speaker, and author. I'm super excited about this because I think now more than ever, with increasing competition and the increasing speed of change out there in the world, we need to become better leaders to be successful. So with that, welcome, Kevin, and thanks a lot for joining us.
Brett, thank you so much for sharing me with your audience. I'm delighted to talk about things that will hopefully be very interesting and useful to them.
Yeah, I mean, I know throughout my career, leadership has always been something that's been near and dear to my heart because I recognize the value, and I've worked in organizations with great leadership, and I've worked in organizations with terrible leadership, and it's a very, very different experience. So I know you're going to be sharing with us some amazing tips, but I actually wanted to start off with your background. So you started with a typical career in corporate America, and then you made the switch. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I spent almost 30 years, 29 and a half years in corporate America. I worked 10 years in a company called D. Laval. It was originally owned by Transamerica. We did heavy equipment, steam turbines, compressors, all kind of technical stuff. And that was a great entry after I had graduated from engineering school. And then I had the opportunity in the 80s to go work for Intel. So it was a major switch for me. But my passion was around technology. I loved computers. I loved video production. And I had an opportunity to spend my last 18 years at Intel. But one of the things I had a goal was I wanted to retire at 50. And when I say retire, my wife will tell you it's not really retirement. It was leave the corporate world to be able to go do my own thing. And I had a fantastic mentor and coach at Intel, and I put a 10-year plan together, and I actually retired at 51. And yeah, thanks. And I started up a company called Magna Leadership Solutions, and I took 2 of my colleagues from Intel. My last job at Intel, I was managing Intel's management leadership development for the world. And we used to do 2,500 managers and leaders in 10 different countries. And when I left Intel in 2007 to start up the firm, to really go help smaller organizations that really didn't have $10 million budgets, that when I had left, we had just finished training our 40,000th manager. So I got really good at that. And I went on I did my MBA, and then went on and did all my doctoral work in organizational leadership and management. And that's really my passion, because I've seen, as you mentioned, when you have great leaders, the amazing things you can do, and when you have terrible leaders, all of the challenges that presents.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt. I know I've experienced that firsthand in a number of ways. And so, what is it? Obviously, professionally, you were getting involved in leadership anyway. But what is it that made you want to focus in that particular area, or really focus on leadership development?
Well, I mean, when I started school, I did my undergrad at Drexel in engineering and business. And I think that was probably the first time I had this inkling that kind of management leadership, when I had taken the management leadership classes, gave me an idea of some of the leverage that you could provide. And once I got into the corporate world, when the first company was very much a command and control company. Company had been around 100 years. It was all run, all the senior people were all ex-Navy people. So it was very much command and control. And it always, fortunately, the department that I was in product marketing and product management, had fantastic leaders, right? I had 2 amazing leaders, Dick Sparrow and Don Clues, and they were just incredible. And they kind of kept us isolated from upper management. And when I saw some of the things that upper management was trying to do, was all command and control. I thought, this isn't, I don't think this is ideal, and it really didn't fit who I was, which I always had an entrepreneurial spirit. So I started doing some reading. I went back to school, did my MBA, and I recognized what I truly wanted to do, and that gave me the incentive to look for other opportunities. Even though my career had been going great, I really recognized I needed to be more in a different kind of environment. And Intel was a fantastic environment for anyone that knows Intel. Wonderful, wonderful learning organization. Great people, very innovative, high tech. It was a radical change from command and control. And then when I saw that, I thought, man, I really want to learn more. And that's when I went back. After I was there for about 10 years, I went back and did all my doctoral work.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know I actually studied Intel when I was in business school.
Okay.
And that was one of the things, we studied it from the perspective of leadership and also innovation, because, Andy Grove, of course, was there for a time, and you had, just a tremendous focus on all that innovation. And I don't think you can build a world-class organization doing that kind of thing unless you have great leaders in place, because innovation's tough. It's not an easy thing to do. And so you've got to get people in there, and you got to give them the confidence to know that you can try stuff, you can make mistakes, and that isn't going to be fatal to you in your career. So I'm curious, you've seen a lot of people in leadership positions in your career. What are the biggest mistakes that you see that people in positions of leadership make?
Well, I'm not sure we have enough time to list those, but let me give you some of the top ones. I think we use something that kind of came out of Harvard as a Harvard model. We have a program called our Leading Forward Academy. It's a 6-month program to help leaders really transform organizational culture. And one of the things that the 3-step model, or the kind of the circular model, is first thing is the best leaders really know themselves. They've done some deep introspective work, right? They've gotten a lot of coaching, a lot of mentoring. That's the first thing is they have to come with a degree of confidence, not arrogance. They want to come with confidence so that they're assertive and not aggressive, right? So assertive people get the work done. Aggressive leaders go after the individual to attack them. And that's one of the first things. And the second part of the model is that once they understand themselves, they have to really spend the time to know and understand and connect with others, right? So that's the other thing we see is, so the leaders that aren't ideal really just focus on just getting the work done. They really don't know who they are, and they don't spend the time really invested in the other people. And then the third step in the model is initiating and sustaining change. You can, if you know yourself and you understand others, but you don't do anything with it, and you really are not proactive, then you really can't be kind of considered a leader. So I would say, the worst leadership traits are where they're not vulnerable, where they're not transparent. Those are the biggest challenges. And when I get a chance to go in and coach organizations, the best leaders are the ones that are open. They recognize that they need change. They need to develop themselves. And the worst ones is, hey, I'm great. Just give me some tools to make me better. And it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually worked for a company where we had a guy who had been very successful, and then he left, he retired, he went and did something else. And then they actually brought him back because they were opening a new office. And so I hadn't been with this company. My first experience with him was with his second tour of duty. And he was a nice guy, but his management style, leadership style, was anytime anybody questioned him or questioned anything he did, not in a way where they were even challenging him, just trying to ask questions to figure things out about the way that he would operate. His answer was always the same. He would threaten to take away the business that you were building because it was a sales organization. Say, well, I could just take your agency and give it to somebody else. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't know how you think you're going to be able to build anything that's sustainable here when every single time anybody says anything, you threaten to take away all the work that they've done.
Right.
And it didn't ultimately work out. He didn't end up lasting, even though he was successful in his first tour of duty decades earlier. Um, uh, Times have evolved, things have changed. I don't I don't think that you can really get by that way anymore. But he tried it. So I'm curious. I've heard some people say that great leaders are born, right? And
Mm.
that you're just born that way. You have innate traits or whatever it is, and so we've got leadership in our DNA, or we don't. Do you think that that's true, or can great leadership be learned and developed?
Well, there's some really fantastic studies that have been done, so you have some quantitative information, and what they found is that that is not true. That leaders, there are certain people that are born with certain kind of traits and skills that they have, talents, and there's a difference between a talent and a skill. Talent you're kind of born with, just comes naturally, and then there's a skill and something you develop. And the best leaders, the most amazing leaders, I think, are born with a different level of talent. And then what they do is they recognize that and they build on top of that. They build that skill so that they're recognized. I found people that haven't been born with the talent and yet have the same passion for leadership, and they've really put the time in and become amazing leaders as well. So it is a combination of nature and nurture. Not only is it what you're born with, it also has to do a lot with, from what the research has said, a lot with the environment that you're in, with your parenting and family structure, where you live, jobs that your parents and friends do, and communication styles. All of that kind of fits into that, and it's that nature and nurture kind of thing that really builds leaders. But anyone that wants to be and wants to be a great leader, and also has the ability to have that transparency, to not default to the threatening, as you mentioned, or what I would call command and control. Those people have the ability to really make a difference. And there's one other thing I'll mention, Brett. When I was at Intel, so Intel is a very hard driving company. I was fortunate enough I got to work with Andy Grove, a fantastic guy, probably one of the most brilliant people I'd ever met, both technically and in business savvy. Just an amazing guy. Hard, right? He was a hard driver, and his motto was always be firm but fair. And that's kind of really stuck with me. And one of the things that happened at Intel, particularly in the early days, that they had a lot of managers that were the hard drivers, and they really didn't pay attention to the people, and they'd have you get the projects out, they make their margins, hit all their deliverables, and they would get rewarded each year. And one of the challenges was that they weren't measuring the quality piece, right? Like those that were getting all of that had 30% turnover. Now, when you have unlimited resources and you can get people, there's lots of engineers available and designers available, you can do that. And what happened over the years is eventually, they build this reputation and nobody wants to get to work for them. And all of a sudden they can't fill the spots that they need. And what Intel did right before I left is they started measuring, not only you got your evaluation, not only on your performance, also with regard to your organizational performance. What was the retention? What was the job satisfaction? What were people saying with regard to work? How easy was it to bring you in? And they put that in. And what happened was the managers that had kind of zero score on that, on the quality piece, and had the 100% score on the deliverable piece, started to get weeded out, right? That they took early retirements, or they moved them over into special projects, and they started bringing more managers and leaders that had that balance, so that it wasn't this environment where it was just burnout supreme.
Yeah, which makes sense. I mean, because you can only run people so hard. If people don't feel appreciated, they might work for you when you're watching and do what is required. But it's hard to build a great organization or have a great organizational culture if people in general aren't feeling, if they're feeling more under pressure and stress about being at work, and they're doing it out of fear as opposed to joy and passion and all those other things, you can only get so far with that kind of a situation before, good people will leave. They won't stay in that kind of environment forever. So that makes great sense, and that was obviously a smart move. So if somebody out there wants to become a better leader, what would you recommend that they do?
Well, I would say leadership is not a spectator sport, that you have to go out and practice it. And a lot of people who are in individual contributor spots say, well, I'm an individual contributor. I don't really know how or I don't have the opportunity to manage people or lead people. And one of the two things I would do is when I got a new hire, whether it was internal or external hire, when I was managing different chip products or different systems for Intel, the first thing I would do is my first conversation with them when they showed up was I had two things I wanted to talk to them about. First thing I said is, I don't want you working for me 18 months from now, right? I want you to be thinking about your next position, and we're going to do that. And I want you to be able to act in that position. And I want you to take a leadership role. I want you to think about yourself as a leader. So I don't want you working for me 18 months from now. We're going to talk about that in your development plan so that we can get opportunities that are equivalent or better, right? And having that continuous learning model is so important. And the second thing is you need to change your perspective. Is even though you don't have direct reports, I want you to take a leadership mindset. I want you to think about like me, right? As if you were in my position. I want you to think about that today. And as you're interacting with people, I want you to be able to think and act at the next level, because that's going to be able to tell you whether your approaches are working or not. And I think the other thing, Brett, that I found was a lot of the people that came to work for me they were soccer coaches or the kids coaches. They were working on tennis players that were coaching other people or were instructing them. And I think you don't have to do all of your leadership training inside of work, right? It can be even within the family, or if you're doing kids sports. I think that's a great way to learn about yourself and learn about others, and then you can bring that back into the workplace.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Because oftentimes I think when we think about leadership, we associate it with a professional setting. But the reality of it is, whether we're volunteering to coach or even volunteering at the food bank or whatever, there are a lot of places that we can sort of use or at least practice leadership skills, and oftentimes probably in ways that are a lot less threatening or stressful than work itself, because the stakes are lower, right? And so it gives us an opportunity to try different things. And I know I was in scouting as a kid, and one of the things that for me when I was in a leadership role there, even as a kid, I always felt as though anything that we wanted to do, or I wanted to try to help lead the pack or the troop to go do, I would roll up my sleeves first and say, okay, let's go do this together. And that was sort of, I sort of developed and tweaked my leadership style that way, because I was just a kid, but I was working with other kids, and some of them were younger than me, so they looked up to me. And some, so you get an opportunity to sort of test out different things and see how people react to it. And then you can develop those skills and more based on how well you use them. But I think that's a really good advice. So a hallmark of great leaders is that they can build great teams, right? I mean, in order to get anything done of significance, can't all do it ourselves. So we need great teams to accomplish great things. What's your advice on how a leader can build a great team?
Well, I think the first thing is you have to be a great listener. That's the first thing is you have to listen to your people. You have to let them you have to understand what motivates them and engages them and so forth. And it can be, not only in the workplace, I always tried to really understand what was motivating and engaging for other people, for my team members outside of business. And that way we could connect, and whether it was talking about golf or music or sports or whatever it was, understanding things that were engaging for them made it very, very easy to get conversations started. And then eventually the conversations would lead into to business conversations. But I think one of the things that was when I was a product manager before, I spent the first 8 years of my life at Intel on the technical side. I was a product manager, I was an operations manager, and then I was a general manager for a small division. And then I had the opportunity. Intel has a sabbatical. You get a sabbatical every 7 years, where you get to take 2 months off. You leave your computer and your phones there, and you go and refresh. And it was absolutely fantastic. And after I came back from my first sabbatical, I had been doing a lot of management and leadership training. One of the requirements was, at a certain level of management, you had to do 40 hours of training and development, where you were going in and facilitating. And I found I really liked that, and I was really pretty good at that. So what I ended up doing is I had the opportunity to manage Intel University for Arizona, and then ultimately that for the U.S. And that was my transition over to what all my engineering buddies say is to the dark side, into moving over into HR and working with that. And what I found was, with the development of the teams, was that aligning people with things that could get them in the flow zone, right? And flow, for those that don't know, is kind of being in the zone. That was retermed in the 90s, but flow was developed by a gentleman by the name of Dr. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, and he was out of the University of Chicago, and he created this concept of flow. And I had read, and anybody that hasn't read the book, that's one of the first books you want to read as a leader. And it really talks about how do you get people in the zone. And at a very high level, it's when you have the balance of challenge and skill, right? The right challenge and the right skill, you can get in the zone. And we all get into the zone where you look up at the clock and it's 2 hours later than it should be. That's what flow feels like. And the nice thing about flow is that's where the creativity happens, that's where engagement happens. And what I found very, very fascinating after I read the book was, I also found a connection that I also recognized in my staff, that there were certain tasks that people had do that got them into flow more than others. And most of my staff was so much homogenous, right? I would hire master's level graduates that would come in and work. They're all very, very similar, yet each person was a little bit different, and that was always perplexing for me. So in the late 90s and early 2000s, I went back to school to do my doctoral work, and that was what was challenging for me. What I found was I wanted to find a formula. Like, there are 3 types of tasks that we all do. There are routine tasks, doing email, a lot of routine tasks. There's troubleshooting, customer calls, something's broken, have to fix that, trash can's on fire, whatever it is. That's the troubleshooting. And then you have project work, right? Project work of delivering a new project or getting your taxes done or whatever. And there was some great work done by a guy by the name of Bill Daniels from American Training Consulting that looked at this, and he recognized that if you look at our jobs, you can really put your task in each of one of those 3 buckets. And what I recognized was I had this hypothesis of, hey, I think there's a pattern here. Each one of us has one of 496 different mixtures of this, right? Of the different task types. And I would I would look at my staff, and the first person all sitting in the cubicles, all doing about the same kind of stuff in project work. The first person would say, man, I love doing A and I hate A and B and C items. And the next person would say, I love B, but I hate A and C. And the next person would say, I love C, I hate A and B. I'm thinking, why is that? You're all very similar behaviors and so forth. So my belief was that if I could identify their mixture and give them more of what they wanted from the different routine troubleshooting and project tasks, that I could raise their level of job satisfaction, motivation, and engagement, and hopefully get them into flow. And that was no one had ever done that. Um, so I proposed it to my doctoral chair. He said, okay, but you're going to have to develop an assessment for this. So I contacted Dr. Chiksing Mihai at the University of Chicago. I said, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to extend your theory on flow. Would you work with me and help me do that? And he said, sure, I'd love to do that, right? And we worked together and we developed an assessment, which I'm going to give away that assessment tool at the end of the session, right? We're going to put that in the show notes. So anybody that wants to take it and identify their ideal task mixture, how to get in that flow and get in that zone, we'll give that assessment tool away for you, and you can figure that out. So long-winded method is to build the teams is figure out what people love, assess what they want to do, right? And then give them more of the task types that really motivate and engage them. And ultimately what's going to happen, you're going to find they're going to get in the flow. And flow doesn't necessarily guarantee productivity. It usually comes with productivity. What does happen is that's where creativity explodes. And that's where you want to be. Can you imagine being in flow all of the time? It'd probably be exhausting, and you want to just go back and do it later. And that's what I try to do with my staff, right? Try to get them in there as much as possible. And when they weren't motivated and engaged, that was the thing I focused on. And I wanted to, I've done a lot of analytic type of things as a nerd tech person as well as a professor. And if I could identify that and put them in a place that motivates them, then you get better results, and they kind of manage themselves, which is ideal for a leader.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating approach. I was very familiar with the term. I was unaware that there was even an assessment for that. So that's fantastic that you're able to create that. So if we want to build effective teams, right? So obviously hiring comes into play there as well. Can the flow assessment be used in the hiring process as well?
Yeah, so the assessment's called the task quotient, right? Or what I call TQ. So it's related to flow, but it's not a measurement of flow. There's a method that we use in our leadership programs on how to identify flow that's connected to it. But the assessment itself is just figuring out what are the tasks that you want that are important to you. So you can once you kind of identify the task, then you can structure it. And we use the assessment along with other assessments like DISC and motivators and emotional intelligence when we coach organizations for hiring. And one of the things that we found is that when you're hiring a person, you want to make sure they're a good behavioral fit, they have a good fit for you technically. And one of the things that's always been missing from that is that we were working with organizations that were hiring great people, had lots of great skills, and they were lasting 30 to 60 days and then quitting over and over and over again. What we recognized was that they were putting them into an environment where this person may have a 50% project need, and they stick them in a call center in particular, and they're doing 90% routine work, right? And they have a 8% routine tolerance. So what we did was we started getting them to use that, and they would do the task quotient assessment ahead of time, and you would give them banding. You're looking for someone, that runs, 47 to 56 here for routine, or someone, particularly if they're really doing heavy troubleshooting, the same kind of thing. And you would give them kind of bands that they want to focus on. So instead of hiring the people that are 90% project work, and you're going to stick them on the phone answering technical questions about computer support, technically they're going to be good. Behaviorally, they're probably going to deal well with the team. Yet every day is just going to be grueling for them because you're not going to get them in flow. And it's we proved that pretty much within 30 minutes from the simulation that we run, that I can get people incredibly dissatisfied just by augmenting some of the times for the different tasks. And if you do that, for 30 minutes or 30 hours or 30 days or 30 years, it's just mentally exhausting. So to go to your point, yeah, hiring, you want to pay more attention because you can get the right people, but if you don't put them in the right environment, it's a revolving door.
Yeah, that's fascinating. We've all seen, I think, either in an organization we worked for or maybe somebody we've hired ourselves, where on paper it looked like somebody was a perfect fit, and they come in and they're there for a little bit and then they take off, and
Mm-hmm.
you wonder, I don't understand. Like, everything seemed like it made sense. And I was actually going to ask you next about keeping people happy so they stay, because obviously the top performers in every industry, every field, have a lot of options. They're not usually stuck at one company. They could go work wherever they want. And so, in terms of trying to keep them happy so you can retain them, is the idea then to give them the things that match with their, that would put them in flow as often as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what I would do with the teams that I have is, because we assessed everybody and everyone knew what the different preferences were, when new projects would come in and say, hey, I have this new project, we need to figure out who's going to work on that. What we'd say is let's pull out the flow diagram. I want you to tell me, it would describe the project, and I want you to place the dot on the flow diagram. Have the whole team do that, of where you would be. And if the challenge is too high and the skill is too low, you get severe anxiety. And if the challenge is too low and the skill is too high, you get boredom. And then people will kind of place it, and the people that were in the extreme anxiety or extreme boredom, they were out of the running. And the people that were closer to the flow, then we'd have a discussion like, okay, so Bill and Sue and Sam, it looks like you guys are your skill set is about right. It's a little bit of a challenge for you, so you're going to learn. Let's talk about who's the right person, or maybe even pairing them together. And rather than doing what many managers do, is like, who's got open time or who just finished a project, and you just dump another project on them, which may be in the extreme boredom or extreme anxiety area. It allowed them to feel in control, and because there was a scientific method to place the people, rather than just dumping, what I found is people appreciated it, and it's a process. Once they left my organization in 18 months, right, to go move on to other organizations, they would take that process with them, right, and I was kind of leading by example. And when I left Intel, my learning management system had said, after 18 years, I had taught just a little over 4,000 managers. So I got pretty good at that, and I had this great network. And I think hopefully a lot of the people, didn't have 4,000 people that worked for me, but I probably ended up over time, I probably had 100 or so people that had been in my organization and worked for me. And my hope is that they went out and they tried to role model some of the stuff that I did.
Well, and the other thing that's great about that approach is, not only does it give people more of a sense of control because they're sort of buying into it and vying for the things that they want to do, but also it's developmental. So people feel like they're growing as they're doing what they're doing, instead of just being saddled with, wow, we've got this other thing that you've got to do, so just keep doing that. If it challenges them enough where they're stimulated by it, but at the same time not overwhelmed, then they ultimately get growth out of that. And everybody feels better when they're developing and growing, professionally in what they're doing. So you can see the genius in that approach. It's really, really smart and unique. So a question about teams, just to take this one step further. Sometimes we inherit people. So maybe we're in an organization, or maybe we've hired some people, and maybe some of the people that are on the team just really aren't that engaged. They're not that motivated. Is there something that we can do to sort of fix that, or be able to bring them into a situation where they would be more productive and happy?
Yeah, well, I think the same approach works, right? The very first thing is you want to evaluate what they're doing, so, from their task quotient perspective, are they getting the right mixture, right, of tasks, right? And then the second question is, do you have the ability within the teams, small teams that have very unique roles, right, where you have an engineer and a designer, and you have a HR person and and a purchasing or whatever, and a salesperson. When you have small teams like that, where the individual engagement areas and skill sets are very, very different, it's very difficult to apply the approach that I was describing. In a situation where you have a bunch of support people all doing similar things, or project managers or designers or advertising people doing similar things, is you want to get them to start having discussions with other people to find out and have them essentially organically manage, right? Hey, I'm not happy. You've been heard of me. I'm not happy. Here's the stuff I like to do. Here's the stuff I don't like to do. Mostly the stuff I don't like to do. And me knowing the team, I say, the things that are challenging for you, for maybe a more junior person, or things that are not challenging for you for a more junior person, would get them into flow. So you two need to have a discussion where maybe you can mentor them and start transitioning over some of that stuff you don't like. And then let's identify the things that you do like to do. And let's start trying to bring more. And then we'd put a development plan together. We'd pick a period of time. The good thing is most of this can happen usually over a 60, 90-day period. So there's hope at the end of the light at the end of the tunnel for the individual. And every once in a while you just figure out, and I've had people like this where they're just not the right fit, right? That there was an opportunity, they needed a job, they had some of the skills, but it wasn't really where their passion or interest was. And for those individuals, you'd be honest with them, like, okay, so let's put a development plan in place, particularly if they're a good employee, right? If you've inherited them but they're not motivated, and they're a good employee, then you want to develop them. If you've inherited them, they're not motivated, and they're a bad employee or a trouble employee, that's a different discussion. That's something you probably want to work out with HR. I found that most organizations have the right people. They just have not put them in the right seats on the bus. In fact, myself and my business partner wrote an article many years ago. If anybody goes and Googles it, they can find it. It's called "Throw the Seats Off the Bus." And Jim Collins, who did Good to Great, said get the right people in the right seats on the bus. And we wrote an article after Jim had published his book, and it's called "Throw the Seats Off the Bus." And our philosophy was, rather than trying to get people, you have these seats that fit 150-pound people, right? And everybody's trying to get fit in the 150-pound seat. Is throw the seats off the bus, throw the beanbag chairs in there, and allow the jobs to fit the individual. And if you can do that, we know that you're going to raise motivation, satisfaction, engagement. We also did some additional university research. It really makes people feel more empowered. And when all of that is happening, the work that you have to do as a leader really is incredibly diminished, because you're really kind of letting themselves. You're not ignoring them, but you're letting them do the kind of things that tactically are at a different level than what you should be doing as a leader, or thinking more strategically.
That's fantastic. What a great approach. So let's talk about how you can help entrepreneurs, executives, leaders that are out there. You mentioned you were going to allow us to be able to get the assessment for free. Can you tell us about your programs, products, services that you offer, and where can we find them?
Sure. So 3 buckets, right? The company that we started with 2 of my Intel partners back in 2007. We celebrate our 17th year, and every year has been better than the last. We get to work with lots of small organizations. So if you have an organization that you want your leaders trained, we don't use the word training. If you want your leaders developed, we don't do training, because training's kind of do it and then put it on the shelf. We want to develop it. That we have a program called our Leading Forward Academy, and it's really much more about kind of changing the culture of an organization organically through the leaders and getting the work to better as a team. We use all the tools that I have talked about. So you can find that on our main site at magnaleadership.com. The second kind of bucket is I about 3 or 4 years ago, I got involved with positive intelligence. And people may have heard of that and they haven't heard of that, PQ. They can, if they're interested in kind of developing individuals so that they can deal with the stress, that they can really identify the things that are stressful and driving them away from being productive or engaged. The positive intelligence approach, we offer programs on that. You can find that at pqtraining and coaching.com. And then last thing is I do a lot of executive coaching for people that are in transition, or that have been downsized, or people that really want to move from the corporate world like I did into an entrepreneurial environment. So how do you do that? And I do a lot of executive coaching, particularly people that have come through the leadership programs with us. The executives also want some coaching. And then I have a site called coachsultants.com. So it's a combination of coaching and consulting together. So if you go to coachsultants.com, you can find us there. And then the one thing I'd offer for anybody listening, Brett, is the easiest way is to get a hold of me is just send me an email. Kevin@magnaleadership.com will get you there. If you'd like to discuss any of the things that we've talked here, my promise to you is there'll be absolutely no sales pitch. I don't do sales pitches. My function in life is helping others. And like I said, that was my goal, when I was 50, go out, help organizations that don't have the $10 million budgets that I was fortunate to have, and help them really build different structures and cultures. So lots of ways to get a hold of me. And the biggest thank you is if people do want to reach out to me and say, hey, I have this challenge, what would you recommend? And I'll make some recommendations. If we can work together, fantastic. If not, I have a gigantic compendium of books and articles and approaches and tools. They used to call me the tool man at Intel. So if you needed a tool, you would go to Kevin. He knows which tool to use. So I can point you in a direction. That won't necessarily be my tool, but I've had a ton of great experience working with lots of other assessments, and anything that's really quantitatively based works really well for me. And I typically lean towards only the assessments that are statistically validated. There's lots of assessments out there. Most of them are interesting, but they may not provide the true results that are validated, so you get your results.
That's perfect. Thanks so much for sharing that. So with that, it's just about time to wrap things up. I want to thank you again, Kevin, so much for sharing all your insights and great tips with us. Visit magnaleadership.com for management and leadership products, pqtrainingandcoaching.com for positive intelligence information, and coachsultants.com for executive coaching. Thanks for tuning in.